everyone, this is some competitive practice of Moon ETF versus Andromeda. We're doing a bit more competitive play recently because regional season is up. So I keep my opening hand because it has a piece of ice to defend HQ, as well as tech startup for a Stealth Moon. Bonus was that I drew into mandatory drew into another ice, so I could protect the tech startup here. Meanwhile, my opponent gets the nut start. Career fan to Temujin click 1, medium click 2, and allows them to run twice. So this gives them enough money for the early game, but more importantly, gives them the huge threat of a medium right away, and I don't have any ice to defend it. Now, I'm not sure if this is a mistake. If anyone, any competitive players are watching, please enlighten. Was it correct for my opponent to actually trash the 2 cards in the bin? I think they what did they trash? They trashed a tech startup and clone suffrage movement. Was it correct to do so? Because this actually enabled me to very easily make the decision of shuffling my deck, get a Stealth Moon out, and then play Friends next turn. Without those 2 cards in the bin, I would not have any assets to spam out, and tutoring up a Stealth Moon would be a lot worse of an option. So I'm actually not very sure. In any case, I clicked 1 drew, and I tried to find ice and failed. So instead, I went for the Stealth Moon play here, before going out with Friends, knowing that if my opponent trashes my remotes, I have a second Friends to Friends back more stuff to get a big Stealth Moon. So hopefully this should divert my opponent's attention from R&D. Now, a lot of you might be looking at this and saying, hey, this looks really bad for you. Your opponent's just going to run R&D 4 times and get lots of money off Temujin and medium. Well, the truth is they could do that, but this is not very good in the long run, because if I do actually find an ice eventually, they can't run R&D, and eventually I can purge and they'll be very behind on tempo. Also, I think with a Temujin direct on R&D in addition to having a medium, my opponent is actually gaining a lot of value from these R&D runs. And this is one of the ways in which you can lose very easily as Moon ETF. Having pincered, just a lot of pressure on R&D and your central. This is one of the weaknesses of Moon ETF, because if they're forced to put ice on centrals, it means that ice is not going to defend an Stealth Moon, and this is bad news bears for Moon ETF, because the objective of at least this version of Moon ETF, which contains successful field tests, is to get a big successful field test off. That is big success indeed. Now I have a second tech startup, the tech startup from the bin. I'm debating whether to get something out here at this point. Getting something out here would mean that the tech startup will go in the bin and I get an Stealth Moon counter, so it seemed pretty good. I'm fetching a second Stealth Moon here. This might be a mistake. Let me know in the comments if what I should have done here. Maybe I should have gotten a daily business show. That would have seemed better. I don't think I need a second Stealth Moon once the first one's out, but the reason I wanted to get the second Stealth Moon was because I was about to pop the first one so that I would get money and a piece of ice that I could use. That was my rationale here. Now, with the second Stealth Moon out, I can then res the Stealth Moon and drop a bunch of assets. Specifically, first Lakshmi and then Friends for tech startup. Nope, I take back the tech startup. Instead, I install a Stealth Moon instead of the tech startup in the secure remote, as well as a clone suffrage movement out in the open. So with this, I immediately get a 3 counter Stealth Moon to replace the first 3 counter Stealth Moon I had. Now, you can actually argue that this is actually not a very good play for me, because this leaves my 3 counter Stealth Moon out in the open. And this is a problem because I'd rather have the Stealth Moon in the remote. So actually what I should have done, possibly, was to actually pop the first Stealth Moon before using the tech startup to get the second Stealth Moon under the remote. Now that I'm watching this back, that sounds like a much better idea, because 2 things. Firstly, I would guarantee that I draw non-agendas, because my opponent has been digging my R&D. Popping the Stealth Moon before using the tech startup would guarantee that I draw the cards my opponent saw off the medium. So this means that I'll be drawing useful cards like assets and ice. Secondly, the new Stealth Moon that was tutored out by this tech startup will now be in the Eli remote. This is very important because, as you see here, my opponent ran my Stealth Moon first click and was forced to pop it way prematurely before I could this is not a time I want to pop it, because I want to get a few more counters so that I have enough of a credit buffer to score a successful field test and maybe have a Jeeves on the table. So this is actually a significant mistake looking back, and it's something I can improve on in my play. I must always be conscious of the fact that tech startup does indeed shuffle R&D, and that I can use to my advantage. I should have pop the draw before shuffling my R&D with tech startup. Now here's the second mistake I made. Drawing into the quandary, I saw that R&D was going to be porous. My opponent could run it click 1, and unless it was an architect, I can't do really much about it. So I decided to short R&D by dropping a quandary on R&D. This is a mistake. The quandary should be going on the Estelle Moon server instead. For reasons we'll see later. But for now, I do manage to get another Estelle Moon in my remote. So now this is where I start saying to myself, okay, from this point on, I'm going to build up for a big Estelle, and I'm going to score the successful field test from my hand, ideally with a Jeeves on the table, but if not, that's double biotic. So when you score a successful field test, you want there to be as many cards as possible in your hand so that you get maximum mileage out of successful field tests by drawing a whole bunch of cards. This entails having a big Estelle Moon, so that you can inflate your hand size to loads before scoring the SFT, successful field test. My opponent runs my last remote, which I sneakily pushed out a Vitruvius in, and forced me to rest the Chrysium and the Lakshmi. The Lakshmi power counters then defend my Vitruvius from my opponent's stealing, and I get to score it off the table, putting myself on the board at 2 agenda points. Here I sneakily ditched the second Vitruvius in the bin. Hopefully I can recover it with a Jackson later on. It's very unlikely that my opponent runs my bin. This is yeah, putting yourself in your opponent's shoes, you realize that my opponent has absolutely no reason to run the bin because they don't run Data Sucker. While they might install Temujin on archives, that is far less likely than them installing Temujin on an exposed Turtlebacks. This is because this particular run-based Andromeda deck runs Aeneas Informant. So if my opponent has, say, if they have an Aeneas Informant out with Desperado Temujin, they can actually claim 6 credits per run if they directed the Temujin on a remote with an asset in it with no ice. So therefore, basically what I'm saying is my opponent's incentivized to direct Temujin on an asset rather than archives, and therefore archives is actually a safe place to dump agendas in. Now my opponent runs the Turtlebacks and destroys it with John Masnori and Dirty Laundry and Desperado getting a lot of mileage. So this is how you build a run-based deck to combat asset spam. You have a lot of stuff that compress your clicks as you run the remotes. Now my opponent installs a Mongoose here, which is a really horrible breaker, but in this case it's actually a really good breaker. The one breaker you want to see as Andromeda is Mongoose, because this allows you to run first click and not have to worry about any of Moon Spam's ice. You have Architect, which you can break with Mongoose, you have Eli and Fetch Out 3, both of which you can click through, and finally you do have some of the end run ice, which don't do anything to you. They snap a tag on you, that's about it, because you have John Masnori. In this case, it's an Eli, therefore my opponent is able to get through my remote. They were not afraid of running into Architects, so they were able to contest my Moon. Therefore, I was forced to pop my Moon early, and this poses a big problem for me. That was the Moon I was banking on to get me my huge SFT. But instead, I don't have the money to score the huge SFT. I don't have the assets to spam out or the ice to spam out with the SFT. All I have are agendas. This is bad, and this is why the quandary should have been on the remote. If I had the quandary there, my opponent wouldn't have been able to contest my SFT remote. Now the only thing I can do here is to play ELP and cross my fingers and hope my opponent doesn't run archives, because there are 4 agenda points in there. I'm severely flooded at this point. Not so much flooded as having drawn through most of my deck, but haven't been finding stuff. My economy hasn't been good, the Turtlebacks have not been very effective, and neither have the Estelle Moons. I've been popping them for 2 or 3 cards a piece, which is just not enough in the SFT version of this deck. So now I'm just frantically drawing through my deck, trying to find some sort of asset to combo with Turtlebacks, but I'm not seeing it. All I see is ice, therefore I'm forced to ice up my Turtlebacks here. So this is where the situation starts looking really grim for me. My opponent's setting up really quickly, getting the Aeneas Informant out with a couple of daily casts, and they are now searching for their breakers. They have some breathing room to actually search for breakers, because those 2 daily casts are going to give them a huge amount of money. I also have to respect the dual threat. R&D is actually kind of vulnerable. I need to patch up R&D before my opponent finds all the breakers and starts digging my R&D for half its cards. So this is why on this turn I decided to purge. I lost 3 clicks there, which is huge. Again, this is why the turn 1 medium play is so valuable when you do have the access to that option. A turn 1 medium play allows my opponent to just pressure R&D constantly and force a purge sooner or later. My opponent finds the SFT I sneakily put on the board, but at this point I was kind of resigned. The win was in the bin, and I don't have any way to salvage it. I haven't seen a Jackson, I haven't seen the Jeeves or the Daily Business Show that I needed. I've expended all my friends in high places early on, and now they're in the bin. I can't do anything. My opponent's controlling my assets really well. They're running every single asset they can every turn, and trashing them all. At this point, Andromeda's rich enough to contest my assets even without the help of Temujin. This is when you know things are going real downhill. I'm forced to actually, I finally find a Jackson at least, that's good news, but I don't see my win condition in sight. It seems like I'll have to use Baltic Labor for the rest of the game to win. Unfortunately, my asset spam game has been failing, therefore I don't have enough money to do the spam. And well, still, my opponent now contests the Christian on HQ, getting an agenda in the process and going up to 6 agenda points. I knew I was done for in very short... I'm going to be done for in a very short amount of time. At this point, I'm just going to flood my hand with Jackson so that I don't have to worry about legwork here. And at this point, I know that if I'm going to win the game, I need to actually have a secure remote to actually put something in. At least force my opponent to run through my secure remote instead of plowing through my hand with legwork, because that's how I'm going to lose. So I'm going to pitch the SFT in the bin. At this point, SFT is useless. My Estelle Moon game has completely flopped, and I need to win on Biotic Labors. So, yep. The assets are now here just to steal tempo from my opponent, if they even do that. At this point, I'm just trying to make my opponent play the shell game, distract them using remote so that they won't run my centrals. Because at this point, with 6 agenda points, all my opponent needs to do is to really just hammer R&D until they win. Find the breakers, get a medium dig going, and get 1 agenda point to win. This is not very good for me. I find an Estelle Moon here, so I'm going to start Estelle spamming again. Hopefully, this buys me a turn, and hopefully gives me some money, some badly needed money to score agendas with Biotic Labor. I have the agenda, I have the Biotic, I just need the money. So yeah, hopefully this serves as enough of a distraction. Placing 3 assets on the turn is a very powerful turn that even Andromeda can't really keep up with, even though my opponent is well over 20 credits. Having to trash 2 DBSs is no joke, and they're not getting Aeneas money from it because they're forced to trash it because they don't want me filtering through my deck. As a result, they are now down to 16 credits. But another thing I could have done here was maybe to res both DBSs and pop the Estelle Moon. Regardless, my opponent swoops in for the account siphon here after famming the Eli on HQ, and this is just really grim for me. They don't lose any tempo because they can recover the tags with Aaron Marin, while I'm stuck here with 1 credit to my name. What am I to do? I have an Estelle Moon, but really, what am I to do? I failed to draw assets here, so I can't even pump up the Estelle Moon in my remote. This deck is a lot more fragile than you think, and this game really shows it. When you don't draw the assets you need, because obviously sooner or later you start drawing operations and ice and of course agendas instead of assets, you're in a lot of trouble. And against a deck like Andromeda, which will check every remote because they have the incentive to, you're not going to get very far. This Estelle Moon pop gives me 6 credit. I have 6 leaves me at 6 credits total, enough to score Vitruvius, but bankrupting myself to score Vitruvius at this point is a death sentence. They'll just run R&D 4 times. I am locked. I'm stuck, and if I try to get more than 6 credits, they're going to siphon me again. What am I to do? Again, I'm really stuck here. So at this point, it feels like I am fighting back from an unwinnable position. So long as my opponent plays optimally, there is no chance that I'm gonna win. So yeah, looking back, there are a lot of mistakes that were made again. Not protecting Moon was a very key mistake, and the reason why you have end the runs in the deck like wraparounds and quandaries is precisely because you want to defend these Estelle Moons. Gear check the opponent, make sure they can't get in with just a single mongoose. That is Quandary's purpose. I put it on the wrong server. So yeah, I can't really blame my draw. The total bags didn't come in a timely fashion, but my opponent has been doing a very good job of suppressing my economy. Advanced assembly lines also didn't really show up early, which was a problem. The early friends in high places were used on things like tech startup and clone suffrage movement instead of advanced lines, which gives me positive tempo. As such, I am finding myself struggling for economy right now when I should be actually fast advancing agendas to victory. This deck is not actually as rich as you think, especially with someone controlling my assets in the manner that my opponent is. They are doing a very good job of it. At this point, I'm forced to bring out the Jackson from my bin, and you know things are not good when you're forced to install Jackson instead. I also never managed to get a DBS off. I think having a DBS would have been really huge, and I could have gotten a DBS on one of my tech startup retrievals. I think I underestimate the power of DBS when it comes to filtering through my deck. Every draw that I make that isn't an asset is a waste of time for me, and that's because back to the start, I never got a DBS up throughout this entire game. So I think that was one of my big losses. There's a reason why this deck runs 3 DBSs. Firstly, it's really annoying for most people to trash, Andromeda's no exception. Yeah, 4 to trash is really annoying, especially if your opponent can just friends it back. When you use friends in high places, you really want to be recurring either those high trash cost assets to make it really painful for your opponent, or advanced assembly lines, which gives you positive tempo. This game I made the mistake of using friends too many times on cards like Clone Suffrage Movement and Tech Startup, cards which are trivial for my opponent to trash. Here you see my opponent going in for the legwork to close out the game. There was nothing I could do to recover from this position. So what did we learn? Besides harping on the fact that I should have put the Quandary on the Estelle Moon, looking at the flowchart here, it seems like the disruptive factor was actually not so much the defended moon. After all, I did manage to get a sizable moon off at several points throughout the game. The big problem was that I did not abuse the synergy with Daily Business Show and Total Backs, and that was what cost me. This engine here is very strong, and that was a point that I did not try to strive for. There were lots of opportunities for me to defend Total Backs and DBS, or to use Tech Startup to retrieve one of those pieces. And believe me, having a DBS up while popping your Estelle Moons would have gone a long way. I did not respect the fact that having a DBS trigger is equivalent to drawing an extra card, because you're burying useless cards they don't need, like extra ice, extra biotics, etc. So that was the key weakness that prevented me from actually progressing to the third part in the flowchart, which was scoring the big SFT. Not so much the fact that I did not have a big Estelle Moon, in fact I was too tunneled into that. The fact that I neglected the DBS and Total Backs engine was what cost me. I should also note to use friends on more taxing targets, because that's what friends are for. To really set Andy's tempo back. This is why runners always dread seeing a friends, because they will have to spend a lot of tempo on the next turn mitigating the damage done by friends. And this game I just did not maximize the amount of damage I did with each friend. So when I needed the friends later on, they were in the bin because I used them on not so good targets. Finally, I realized how much power or agency my opponent has once they find the Mongoose. And of course, since it's criminal, they're special order, you bet they'll find the Sentry Breaker in good time. Even though Mongoose sucks as a breaker, it does give them the impunity to run on first click without ELP out, knowing that most of the, if not all of the ice, can be dealt with in some way or another. They do not risk any painful face checks. They can click through things or break stuff. So Mongoose actually allowed my opponent to play more aggressively, and once my opponent started running my remotes, started running my Estelles, that was when the game started crumbling for me. So that's all for this video, but before we go off, I have a fun quiz for all of you, so do check out this link here. I'll put it in the video description below. In this quiz, I give you 25 different card names, and you have to tell me for each card whether they are going to rotate this upcoming rotation cycle or not. Do check out the quiz and share your score in the comment section. Don't worry, even if it's a low score, no one's going to mock you. The interesting thing I want to research with this quiz is whether players who have built decks for cash refresh are likely to do better on this test, knowing the card pool better. So besides including your score in the comment section, be sure to tell me how much into cash refresh deck building you are. Let's see if the cash refreshers can do better than those who ignore cash refresh. Until then, happy quizzing!